walked into my husband's office to surprise him for our anniversary, phone ready to record his reaction, but instead caught him with his secretary wearing my grandmother's pearl necklace. "I choose her over you," he smirked, not knowing I was recording every word. 3 hours later, I handed that video to my divorce lawyer along with evidence that would cost him everything: his job, his reputation, and the company he thought he'd inherit from my family.
Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're a subscriber, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Tell us a duh.
I wasn't supposed to be standing in the marble lobby of Evergreen & Associates at 7:30 p.m. on our 10th wedding anniversary. I was supposed to be home, putting the finishing touches on the candlelit dinner I'd spent all afternoon preparing, waiting for Curtis to come through our front door with his usual apologetic smile and hastily purchased flowers from the corner market. But here I was, clutching a bottle of Dom Perignon and the vintage Cartier watch I'd saved months to buy him, my phone already open to the camera app because I'd planned to record his surprised reaction when I appeared in his office doorway. The security guard Jim had waved me through with a knowing smile. After 10 years of marriage, everyone at Curtis's law firm knew me as the devoted wife who occasionally brought late-night dinners or picked up forgotten files. Working late again for the Henderson merger, Curtis had texted me 2 hours earlier. "Might be another all-nighter. Rain check on dinner. I'll make it up to you this weekend, I promise." It was the third rain check this month. The Henderson merger had consumed our lives for weeks, or so I'd been told. Curtis would leave before dawn and return after midnight, collapsing into bed with mumbled apologies about deadlines and demanding clients. I'd wake to find his side of the bed cold, a hastily scrawled note on his pillow promising things would return to normal once the deal closed. I understood. I'd always understood. Curtis Burnett was a partner at one of Chicago's most prestigious law firms, a position he'd worked 15 years to achieve. Success required sacrifice, and as his wife I'd learned to make those sacrifices alongside him. Postponed vacations, canceled dinners, lonely weekends, all part of the price we paid for the life we'd built together. But tonight was different. Tonight was our 10th anniversary, the same date we'd chosen 10 years ago because Curtis said October 15th would be easy to remember, falling right after the busy summer merger season and before the holiday crunch. Our own little celebration, he'd promised, when we can focus entirely on each other. The elevator climbed to the 42nd floor, each number lighting up as we passed the lower floors filled with junior associates grinding through their billable hours. I'd made this journey countless times, but tonight felt special. I imagined Curtis's face when I appeared in his doorway, the stress melting away, replaced by that boyish grin that had first caught my attention at Northwestern Law School, where we'd met during his 3rd year and my MBA program. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime into the familiar reception area of Evergreen & Associates. The firm's name etched in brass letters behind the empty reception desk caught the light from the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a spectacular view of Lake Michigan. During the day, this space buzzed with activity, attorneys rushing between meetings, paralegals wheeling carts of documents, clients waiting nervously for consultations that would determine their futures. Now it was nearly empty. A few lights remained on in the corner offices where the senior partners worked, including Curtis's office at the far end of the hall. I could see the warm glow spilling from his doorway, and my heart quickened with anticipation. I'd planned this surprise meticulously. The champagne was the same vintage we'd shared on our wedding night, a 2014 Dom Perignon that had cost me more than I'd admit to Curtis, who'd grown increasingly concerned about our spending as his partnership track intensified. The watch was even more extravagant, a vintage 1970s Cartier tank that I'd found at an estate sale and had restored to perfect condition. Curtis had always admired classic timepieces, often pausing to examine them in shop windows during our weekend walks through the Gold Coast. 10 years deserves something special, I'd told myself while writing the check that would drain most of my personal savings account, the one Curtis didn't know about, funded by freelance marketing consulting I did for small businesses. It was my independence fund, money I'd earned through late nights and weekend projects, kept separate not out of secrecy but out of a desire to maintain some small piece of financial autonomy. As I walked down the hall, my heels clicking softly on the polished marble floor, I could hear voices coming from Curtis's office. He wasn't alone, probably on a conference call with the Henderson team, or meeting with associates who were pulling their own all-nighter. I slowed my pace, not wanting to interrupt something important. The merger was worth $40 million to the firm. Curtis had mentioned it was the biggest deal of his career. I paused outside his door, phone ready, waiting for a break in the conversation to make my entrance. That's when I heard her laugh. Light, musical, distinctly feminine. Not the tired chuckle of an overworked paralegal, or the brisk efficiency of a senior associate, but something softer, more intimate. My hand froze on the doorframe. Curtis was saying something I couldn't quite make out, his voice lower than his usual professional tone, carrying an inflection I recognized but hadn't heard in months. It was the voice he used to use with me, back when we were dating, when every conversation felt like a secret shared between lovers. I should have knocked then. I should have announced myself, walked in with my surprise and saved us both from what came next. But something held me back. Call it intuition. Call it the sixth sense that develops after 10 years of marriage. Call it the growing certainty that the late nights and missed dinners and forgotten anniversaries weren't entirely about work. Instead, I stepped closer to the doorway, my phone still recording though I'd forgotten I was holding it, and peered around the corner into Curtis's office. What I saw would change everything. Curtis was behind his desk, but he wasn't reviewing contracts or preparing legal briefs. He was leaning back in his leather chair, tie loosened, shirt partially unbuttoned, looking at a young woman perched on the edge of his desk. She couldn't have been older than 25, with long auburn hair that caught the light from his desk lamp, and a figure that my 40-year-old body, despite years of yoga and careful eating, could no longer match. But it was what she was wearing around her neck that made my blood run cold. My grandmother's pearl necklace, the 3-strand Mikimoto masterpiece that had been missing from my jewelry box for 2 months. I'd torn our house apart looking for it, searched every drawer, every pocket, every possible place it could have fallen or been misplaced. I'd even accused our housekeeper, Maria, though I'd apologized profusely the next day, knowing she'd worked for our family with absolute integrity for 5 years. Curtis had helped me search, or pretended to, suggesting I check with our insurance company about filing a claim. These things happen, he'd said with what I thought was genuine sympathy. Maybe it fell behind the dresser, or got caught in the laundry somehow. We'll find it, Evangeline. Or we'll get you something even more beautiful. But I didn't want something more beautiful. I wanted my grandmother's necklace, the same necklace that had graced her throat on her wedding day in 1952, that she'd worn to every important occasion for 63 years until the day she died. The necklace she'd pressed into my hands on her deathbed, her voice barely a whisper as she told me it would bring me the same happiness it had brought her. Pearls represent wisdom gained through experience, my darling girl, she'd said, her fingers trembling as she fastened the clasp around my 16-year-old neck. They're formed through irritation, through pressure, just like the strength we develop when life tests us. Someday you'll understand what that means. I understood now, watching this stranger, this girl who couldn't be more than 25, wearing my family's legacy while she flirted with my husband in his office at nearly 8 o'clock on our wedding anniversary. She was leaning forward, laughing at something Curtis had said, and the pearls caught the light from his desk lamp, each strand perfectly graduated from small to large, the way only genuine Mikimoto pearls could be. The distinctive diamond and platinum clasp, custom made by my grandfather as a surprise for their 5th anniversary, was clearly visible as she turned her head. My phone was still recording, though my hands had begun to shake. Through the small screen I watched Curtis reach across his desk and touch her hand, the same way he used to touch mine during our law school study sessions, when the world felt full of possibilities, and our future stretched ahead like an endless summer. "You know I care about you, Chrissy," he was saying, his voice soft with an intimacy that used to be reserved for me. "But this situation is complicated." "I can't just complicate it," she interrupted, and even through my shock I could hear the practiced pout in her voice. "Curtis, we've been together for 8 months. I'm tired of being your secret." 8 months. The timeline hit me like a physical blow. 8 months ago was February, right around the time Curtis had started working later, missing dinners, coming home smelling like unfamiliar perfume that he blamed on client meetings and networking events. "Chrissy,
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
You have to understand, Curtis continued, standing up and moving around his desk toward her. Evangeline and I have history. 10 years of marriage isn't something you just walk away from overnight. But you said you were going to tell her, Chrissy said, and now I could see her face clearly. Young, beautiful in that effortless way that required no maintenance, no expensive creams or procedures to fight the march of time. You said after the Henderson merger closed you'd file for divorce. The Henderson merger. The fictional all-consuming project that had supposedly kept him away from home for months. I felt sick, realizing how thoroughly I'd been played, how every late night and missed dinner had been cover for this affair. Curtis moved closer to her, his hand settling on her waist as she remained perched on his desk. I am going to tell her, baby. But it has to be the right time, the right way. She's fragile, and she's been so supportive of my career. Supportive. Chrissy's voice took on an edge. Curtis, she's holding you back. When was the last time she made an effort? When was the last time she dressed up for you, or surprised you, or made you feel like the successful man you are? I looked down at myself, the black cocktail dress I'd bought specifically for tonight, the heels that were already making my feet ache, the careful makeup job that had taken me an hour to perfect, the champagne and expensive watch I'd brought to surprise him. All of it suddenly felt desperate, pathetic, the efforts of a middle-aged woman trying to compete with youth and beauty. She tries, Curtis said, but his voice lacked conviction. But you're right, we've grown apart, we want different things now. What do you want, Curtis? Chrissy asked, her hands moving to his chest, fingers tracing the buttons of his shirt. Tell me what you really want. Curtis was quiet for a long moment, and I found myself holding my breath, some part of me still hoping he would say my name, would remember the 10 years we'd built together, the promises we'd made, the life we'd created. Instead, he cupped her face in his hands and said, I want you, Chrissy. I want to wake up next to you every morning without having to sneak out before dawn. I want to take you to firm events without pretending you're just my secretary. I want a life where I don't have to lie anymore. Then stop lying, she whispered, standing up so they were face to face. Choose me, Curtis. Choose us. My grandmother's pearls swayed as she moved, and I wanted to scream, to rush into that office and tear them from her throat, to demand answers and apologies and explanations that would somehow make sense of this betrayal. But I stayed frozen in the doorway, my phone capturing every word, every gesture, every moment of my marriage dissolving before my eyes. That's when Curtis looked directly at her, his voice firm with decision, and said the words that would end everything. I choose you, Chrissy. I choose you over her. The words hung in the air like smoke, choking me as I stood frozen in that doorway. I choose you, Chrissy. I choose you over her. My phone was still recording, capturing every second of my husband choosing another woman on our 10th wedding anniversary, while she wore my grandmother's stolen pearls like a trophy. The device felt heavy in my trembling hands, but I couldn't stop recording. Some instinct told me I would need this evidence, this proof of the moment my marriage officially died.
Chrissy's face lit up with triumph as she wrapped her arms around Curtis's neck. Really? You mean it this time? You're not going to change your mind tomorrow and tell me we need to be more careful? I mean it, Curtis said, his voice stronger now as if making the decision had lifted some burden from his shoulders. I'll tell Evangeline this weekend. I'll file the divorce papers on Monday. This weekend. He was planning to destroy our marriage this weekend. Probably over breakfast, like he was discussing the weather or his golf schedule. 10 years reduced to a casual conversation over coffee and toast. What about the house? Chrissy asked, and I could hear the calculation in her voice, the way she was already planning our future, or rather their future in my place. The house is in both our names, but I put down the down payment for my signing bonus, Curtis said, running his fingers through her hair. With a good lawyer I should be able to keep it. Evangeline never contributed much financially anyway. She's been content to let me handle the real money decisions. Never contributed much financially. The words sliced through me like broken glass. I thought about the 401k I'd cashed out to help him make partner, the inheritance from my great-aunt that had funded his campaign for the Illinois State Bar Association board.
the countless dinners and networking events I'd hosted in our home to help build his career. All of it dismissed as if I'd been nothing more than an expensive accessory. And her jewelry. Chrissy's hand moved to the pearl necklace, her fingers tracing the strands with possessive familiarity. This is so beautiful, Curtis. I love how it looks on me. My stomach lurched. She knew. She knew exactly what she was wearing and where it had come from. Curtis chuckled. The sound so casual it made me nauseous. She has some nice pieces from her grandmother, but honestly, Evangeline never wears them anymore. She's become so practical, always in workout clothes or business casual. When was the last time I saw her dressed up? Really dressed up? Tonight I wanted to scream. Tonight, when I spent 2 hours getting ready to surprise you for our anniversary. When I bought a new dress and had my hair done and chose the most expensive champagne I could afford because I thought our marriage was worth celebrating. Well, I think these pearls have found their rightful owner, Chrissy said, her voice dripping with satisfaction. They suit me much better than they ever suited her. Something inside me snapped, not into rage, that would come later, but into a cold, crystalline clarity. This wasn't just adultery. This wasn't just the end of my marriage. This was theft, both emotional and literal. This was my husband and his mistress discussing dividing up my life like vultures picking over a carcass, assuming I would roll over and accept whatever scraps they deigned to leave me. They had forgotten something crucial. I wasn't just Curtis Burnett's wife. I was Evangeline Castle, granddaughter of Judge Margaret Castle, great-niece of Senator Patricia Castle, daughter of corporate attorney Victoria Castle. I came from a family of women who didn't surrender anything without a fight. I steadied my phone, making sure the camera was still focused on them, still capturing audio clearly. My legal training from business school was kicking in. Documentation, evidence, preparation. Curtis might be the litigator, but I understood the importance of building a case. What if she fights the divorce? Chrissy asked, settling back on the edge of his desk. What if she tries to take half of everything? She won't, Curtis said with the confident dismissal of a man who'd never truly seen his wife as an opponent. Evangeline isn't the fighting type. She's always been accommodating, agreeable. She'll be hurt, sure, but she'll accept it eventually. She might even be relieved. I don't think she's been happy for a while either. Accommodating, agreeable. The words he'd once claimed to love about me, my supportiveness, my willingness to put his career first, my talent for making his life easier, were now being used to dismiss me as a non-threat. Besides, Curtis continued, moving to pour himself a scotch from the bar cart in his office, I know exactly how to handle Evangeline. I'll be gentle but firm. I'll make it seem like this is best for both of us, like we've grown apart naturally. She'll probably even thank me for being honest, instead of letting us both stay miserable. Miserable? Had I been miserable? Looking back over the past months, I realized that yes, I had been, but I'd attributed it to stress, to the natural ebb and flow of a long marriage, to the temporary sacrifice of his demanding career. I'd never imagined that my unhappiness stemmed from being systematically deceived and replaced. You're so smart, Curtis, Chrissy purred, accepting the glass of wine he offered her. That's what I love about you. You always know exactly how to handle people. They were toasting now. Toasting the end of my marriage with drinks from the bar cart I'd given Curtis for his 40th birthday last year. The irony would have been amusing if it weren't so devastating. I should have confronted them then. I should have walked into that office, thrown their betrayal in their faces, demanded explanations and apologies. But something held me back. Call it survival instinct. Call it strategic thinking. Call it the cold pragmatism I'd inherited from generations of castle women who'd learned to fight smart, rather than fight loud. Instead, I stepped back from the doorway, my phone still recording as I moved quietly down the hall toward the elevator. I had what I needed, 47 minutes of audio and video evidence of adultery, theft, and conspiracy to defraud me in divorce proceedings. As the elevator doors closed, I finally stopped recording and looked at my phone screen. The video file was substantial, clear audio, good lighting, both faces clearly visible. Curtis might be a skilled attorney, but he'd just handed me the evidence that would destroy him. The elevator descended through 42 floors, and with each passing number, I felt my shock transforming into something harder, colder, more dangerous. By the time I reached the lobby, I knew exactly what I was going to do. Curtis thought he knew how to handle me. He was about to discover how wrong he was. I sat in my car in the parking garage beneath Evergreen and Associates for 23 minutes, staring at my phone screen. The video file glowed back at me, 47 minutes and 32 seconds of evidence that would change everything. My hands had stopped shaking, replaced by an eerie calm that surprised me. This wasn't how I'd imagined I would react to discovering my husband's affair. I'd always assumed I'd be the woman who screamed, who threw things, who confronted the cheating spouse in a blur of tears and accusations. Instead, I felt like I was watching someone else's life implode while my mind cataloged facts and calculated next steps. The champagne bottle sat unopened on my passenger seat, condensation forming on the glass. The Cartier watch, still in its velvet box, seemed to mock me with its expensive irrelevance. $10,000 worth of anniversary gifts for a marriage that had been dead for 8 months. I pulled out my phone again and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I was looking for. Diana Whitmore, my college roommate who'd become one of Chicago's most ruthless divorce attorneys. We'd stayed in touch over the years, meeting for lunch every few months, and she'd always joked that if I ever decided to leave Curtis, she'd represent me for free just for the challenge of going up against his firm. It was almost 9 p.m., but Diana was notorious for working late. Her phone rang twice before her familiar voice answered. "Evangeline, please tell me you're calling because you finally decided to dump that pompous husband of yours." Despite everything, I almost smiled. Diana had never liked Curtis, claiming he was too smooth, too political, too conscious of appearances. "You always could see right through people," I said. "Oh shit, you caught him, didn't you?" Her tone shifted immediately from teasing to professional. "Where are you? Are you safe?" "I'm safe. I'm sitting in a parking garage with a 47-minute video of my husband and his secretary planning my divorce while she wears my grandmother's stolen necklace." Silence on the other end. Then, "Jesus Christ, Evangeline, tell me you're not joking." I went to surprise him at the office for our anniversary. I was recording what I thought would be a sweet moment for our memories. My voice was steadier than I felt. Instead, I recorded him choosing her over me and discussing how to minimize what I get in the divorce. And the necklace, 3-strand Mikimoto pearls with a custom platinum clasp, been missing from my jewelry box for 2 months. Curtis helped me search for it, suggested I file an insurance claim. The betrayal felt deeper with each detail I spoke aloud. Diana was quiet for a moment, and I could practically hear her lawyer brain processing the information. "Evangeline, this is better than Christmas morning for someone in my profession. How clear is the audio?" "Crystal clear. You can see both their faces, hear every word. He specifically says he chooses her over me, discusses keeping the house because I never contributed much financially, and she's wearing the necklace while talking about how it suits her better than it ever suited me. Holy hell. They're going to wish they'd never met you by the time I'm done." Diana's voice carried the predatory satisfaction of an apex predator who just spotted wounded prey. "Can you come to my office tonight? I want to see this video and start building your case immediately. Tonight. Evangeline, what you have is legal gold, but it's also time sensitive. If Curtis is planning to file Monday, we need to beat him to the courthouse. Illinois is a no-fault divorce state, but adultery still matters for property division, especially when there's theft involved. Plus, if we file first, we control the narrative." I looked up at the office building, its windows glowing like eyes in the darkness. Curtis was still up there, probably celebrating his decision with Chrissy, believing he'd successfully managed the situation. He had no idea that his accommodating, agreeable wife was sitting 42 floors below him, with enough evidence to destroy his career. "Diana, there's something else. Curtis doesn't know about my trust fund." Another pause. "What trust fund? When my great-aunt Patricia died 5 years ago, she left me a substantial trust. I never told Curtis because I stopped, realizing how naive it sounded now. Because I wanted to make sure our marriage was about love, not money. The trust has been managed by my family's attorney, and Curtis has no idea it exists." "How substantial are we talking?" $2.7 million. Diana's whistle was audible through the phone. "Your cheating husband just fucked with the wrong woman. Not only does he not know you can afford the best legal representation money can buy, but he's also grossly underestimated your net worth for property division purposes. I felt something shift inside me, not quite relief, but a sense of power I hadn't experienced in years. For the first time since our marriage began, I held all the cards and Curtis didn't even know we were playing a game. There's more, I continued. Curtis's partnership at Evergreen & Associates is partially dependent on his reputation and character. The firm has a morality clause in their partnership agreements. I remember him complaining about it when he was made partner. If this becomes public, he loses everything, not just the marriage, but his career, his standing in the legal community, possibly even his bar license if we can prove he used firm resources for his affair. Diana's voice was practically gleeful. Evangeline, I've been practicing divorce law for 15 years, and I've never had a case this perfect handed to me. I started my car, feeling a strange lightness in my chest. For 10 years, I'd been Curtis Burnett's wife, Curtis Burnett's support system, Curtis Burnett's accommodating partner. But Curtis had forgotten something important. Before I was his wife, I was Evangeline Castle, and the Castle women didn't lose. I'll be at your office in 20 minutes, I said. Bring the video. Bring any financial documents you have access to. And Evangeline, bring that fighting spirit I remember from college. We're going to need it. As I drove toward Diana's office, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. The woman looking back at me wasn't the heartbroken wife I'd expected to see. She was someone harder, sharper, more dangerous. Curtis thought he'd chosen Chrissy over me. What he'd actually done was choose war. And he was about to discover that I was much better at winning than he'd ever imagined. Diana's law office occupied the entire 38th floor of a gleaming tower in the Loop, her corner office offering a panoramic view of the city lights. As I sat across from her mahogany desk, watching her review the video on her laptop, I found myself thinking about how Curtis and I had ended up here. We'd met during my final semester of MBA school at Northwestern. Curtis was in his third year of law school, already being courted by top firms, his future bright with promise. I was 24, ambitious in my own right, with job offers from 3 major consulting companies. We were both driven, both hungry for success, both certain we could build something extraordinary together. Our first date had been at a small Italian restaurant in Evanston. Curtis had arrived 15 minutes late, apologizing profusely about a law review deadline, but his smile had been so genuine, his attention so focused once he sat down, that I'd forgiven him immediately. He'd asked thoughtful questions about my thesis on corporate restructuring, listened intently to my career plans, made me feel like my ambitions mattered as much as his. "You're going to change the business world," he'd said over tiramisu, reaching across the table to touch my hand. "I can see it in your eyes, that hunger, that intelligence. You're going to be unstoppable." For 3 years we'd been a power couple in the making. Curtis landed his dream job at Evergreen & Associates, while I joined Morrison Consulting as a senior analyst. We'd supported each other through 18-hour days and weekend work sessions, celebrated each other's victories, commiserated over setbacks. When he proposed on the shores of Lake Michigan during a rare free Saturday afternoon, I'd said yes without hesitation. "We're going to build an empire together," he'd whispered as he slipped the ring onto my finger. "Everything we've worked for, everything we've dreamed of, it's all going to happen." The first few years of marriage had lived up to that promise. Curtis made junior partner faster than anyone in his firm's history, while I climbed the ranks at Morrison, eventually becoming their youngest senior consultant. We'd bought the house in Lincoln Park, a gorgeous Victorian that needed work but had incredible potential. Weekend after weekend, we'd painted walls and refinished floors, creating something beautiful together. But somewhere along the way, the balance had shifted. Curtis's career began demanding more time, more energy, more of everything he had to give. The partnership track at Evergreen was notoriously competitive, and Curtis threw himself into it with single-minded determination. Late nights became the norm, then weekends, then entire weeks where we barely saw each other. I'd tried to be understanding. When Morrison offered me a promotion that would require extensive travel, I'd turned it down because Curtis was stressed about a major case and needed support at home. When his colleagues' wives started a charity committee that required significant time commitment, I joined to help Curtis network, even though fundraising events weren't my passion. Slowly, incrementally, I'd made myself smaller to make room for his ambitions. The MBA I'd worked so hard for became useful primarily for managing our finances and planning dinner parties for his colleagues. My own career became secondary, something I pursued around the edges of his schedule. "Look at this part," Diana said, pulling me back to the present. She'd paused the video at the moment Curtis discussed keeping the house. "He's claiming he put down the down payment from his signing bonus. But that's not true, is it?" "No," I said, the memory clear despite the years that had passed. "The down payment came from my trust fund. I hadn't told him about the inheritance yet, so I just said I'd saved more than he'd realized from my consulting work." Diana's eyes gleamed. "So not only is he lying to his mistress about the source of the down payment, but he's also planning to commit fraud in divorce proceedings by claiming sole ownership of an asset you purchased." I thought about all those weekends we'd spent renovating that house together, how proud Curtis had been to show it off to his colleagues, how he'd always referred to it as our home when it suited him. Now it was just another asset to be divided, another victory to be claimed. "The worst part," I said, "is that I would have supported his career anyway. If he'd been honest about feeling trapped, or wanting something different, we could have worked it out. We could have restructured our marriage, or even divorced amicably." "But he didn't want amicable," Diana observed, closing the laptop. "He wanted to have his cake and eat it too. Keep you managing his life and supporting his career while he played house with his secretary. And when that became impossible, he decided to discard you in the most advantageous way possible." I nodded, feeling the full weight of the deception settling over me. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a midlife crisis. This was calculated betrayal, planned and executed over months while I'd continued to love and support the man who was systematically erasing me from his life. "Evangeline," Diana said gently, "I need you to understand something. What we're about to do is going to change everything. Once we file these papers, once this becomes public, there's no going back. Your marriage will be over, but more than that, Curtis's life as he knows it will be over too." I thought about my grandmother's pearls around Chrissy's throat, about Curtis's casual dismissal of my contributions, about the 10 years I'd spent building a life with someone who saw me as disposable. "Good," I said. "Let's destroy him." Diana leaned back in her chair, studying me with the calculating look that had made her one of Chicago's most feared divorce attorneys. "Before we proceed, I need to understand the full significance of this necklace. Judges and juries respond to emotion, and if we're going to use this theft as leverage, I need to know exactly what we're working with." I closed my eyes, letting the memories wash over me. The pearls belonged to my grandmother, Margaret Castle. She was a federal judge, one of the first women appointed to the Northern District of Illinois back in 1971. "Judge Margaret Castle," Diana said, recognition dawning in her voice. "I remember reading about her in law school. Wasn't she the one who ruled on the landmark employment discrimination case that opened doors for women in corporate law?" I finished. "Castle v. Morrison Industries. She faced death threats, had her car vandalized, received hundreds of letters calling her everything from a communist to a man-hater, but she never backed down. The necklace had been with her through all of it. In every newspaper photo from that era, in every television interview where she defended her rulings with quiet dignity, those 3 strands of pearls had been her constant companion, not as decoration, but as armor." "My grandfather gave her those pearls as a wedding gift in 1952, I continued. "They were Mikimoto, the finest Japanese cultured pearls money could buy at the time, but they became something more during her years on the bench. She called them her wisdom pearls, a reminder that strength could be beautiful, that power didn't require sacrificing femininity." Diana was taking notes now, recognizing the legal goldmine of symbolism we were sitting on. "Tell me about the clasp. Custom platinum and diamond piece, designed by my grandfather for their 5th anniversary. It's engraved with the date and their initials, along with a quote from Ruth Bader Ginsburg. 'Fight for the things that you care about, but do it in a way that will lead others to join you.'" I remembered the day my grandmother had explained that quote to me, when I was 12 and struggling with bullies at school who said smart girls weren't popular. She'd fastened the necklace around my young throat, letting me feel the weight of it, the responsibility it carried. "These pearls have been worn by Castle women at every important moment for 70 years, I said. My grandmother wore them when she was sworn in as a judge, when she delivered her most controversial rulings, when she testified before Congress about judicial reform. My mother wore them to her law school graduation, to her wedding, to her first day as a corporate attorney. And you? I wore them to my own law school graduation, even though I went into business instead of law. Grandma said the principles were the same. I wore them when I received my MBA, when I got my first job at Morrison Consulting, when Curtis and I bought our house. My voice caught slightly. I wore them on our wedding day. The irony wasn't lost on me that the symbol of Castle women's strength was now adorning the throat of the woman who was helping to destroy my marriage. But maybe that wasn't irony at all. Maybe it was fate, showing me that I'd forgotten who I was, what I came from, what I was capable of. When my grandmother was dying, I continued, she made me promise something. She said the pearls weren't just jewelry, they were a legacy. Each pearl represented a battle fought, a victory won, a moment when a Castle woman refused to be diminished. She made me swear I would never let anyone make me smaller than I was meant to be. Diana looked up from her notes. And yet you've spent the last 10 years doing exactly that. The words stung because they were true. I'd taken the legacy of women who'd fought for their place in the world, and used it to become the perfect supporting wife. I'd inherited the strength of generations, and squandered it on dinner parties and networking events for someone else's career. Curtis knew all of this, I said. I told him the history on our third date, when he noticed the necklace and asked about it. He said he was honored to be with someone from such a powerful family legacy. He promised he would never ask me to be anything less than what I was. But he did ask you to be less. No, I said, understanding dawning. He didn't ask. He just took. Little by little, decision by decision, he convinced me to make myself smaller until I forgot I had ever been anything else. Diana set down her pen and looked at me directly. Evangeline, I need you to understand something. When we go after Curtis and his mistress, when we expose what they've done, you're not just fighting for money or property or even justice. You're fighting to reclaim who you're supposed to be. I thought about Chrissy wearing my grandmother's pearls like a trophy, about Curtis dismissing my contributions with casual cruelty, about the way they'd laughed while planning to divide up my life between them. Those pearls have been worn by women who changed the world, I said, standing up from my chair. They've graced the throats of women who refused to be silenced, who fought impossible battles and won. And right now they're being worn by a 25-year-old secretary, who thinks stealing another woman's life is some kind of victory. Diana smiled, and it was the smile of a predator who just realized her prey had underestimated everything about the hunt. Now you're starting to sound like a Castle woman, she said. Let's go get your pearls back. Diana poured herself a scotch from the bar cart in her office and offered me one, which I declined. I needed to stay sharp for what was coming. Before we plan our attack strategy, I want to understand the full scope of what Curtis has stolen from you. Tell me about your family's real history, not just the necklace but the women who wore it. I settled back in my chair, feeling the weight of generations pressing down on me. The Castle women have never been ordinary. My great-great-grandmother Catherine Castle was a suffragette who was arrested 3 times for protesting outside the White House in 1917. She wore those pearls to court each time she was tried for disturbing the peace. Diana raised an eyebrow. They're that old? The original strand, yes. Each generation added to them. Catherine's daughter, my great-grandmother Rose, became one of the first female stockbrokers on Wall Street in 1932. She bought the second strand of pearls with her first year's commission, right in the middle of the Great Depression when everyone else was losing everything. I could picture Rose in the old family photographs, sharp-eyed and uncompromising in her tailored suits, the 2-strand necklace her badge of honor in a world that wanted her to fail. She'd supported her entire extended family through the Depression with her Wall Street earnings, refusing marriage proposals from men who wanted her to quit working. Rose never married, I continued. She said she'd rather be successful than settled. But she raised my grandmother Margaret like her own daughter after my great-great-grandmother died in the influenza pandemic of 1936. And Margaret became the federal judge, the youngest woman ever appointed to the federal bench at that time. She was 34 when President Nixon nominated her, and the confirmation hearings were brutal. Senators questioned whether she could be impartial during that time of the month, whether her husband would influence her decisions, whether she had the emotional stability to handle capital cases. Diana winced. Jesus. Different times. Margaret sat through 18 hours of questioning, wearing Rose's 2 strands of pearls like armor. When it was over, she'd been confirmed unanimously, not because they'd changed their minds about women, but because she'd been so prepared, so unshakable that they couldn't find a single flaw in her qualifications. That confirmation had been the talk of our family for decades. Margaret had added the 3rd strand of pearls to celebrate, along with the custom clasp that bore the Ruth Bader Ginsburg quote. She told everyone that the pearls represented the layers of strength women needed: beauty, intelligence, and uncompromising determination. Judge Margaret presided over some of the most important civil rights cases of the 1970s and 80s. I said, employment discrimination, equal pay, sexual harassment. She was writing the legal precedents that would protect women for generations. And she did it all while raising 3 children and dealing with a husband who resented her success. Your grandfather resented her career. I nodded sadly. He'd married a lawyer, but he'd expected her to practice family law or estate planning, something appropriate for a woman. When she became a federal judge, when her career became more prominent than his medical practice, he started drinking, started having affairs. The parallel to my own situation wasn't lost on me. What did she do? She divorced him in 1982, right at the height of her career. The newspapers called it a scandal. A federal judge getting divorced, choosing her career over her marriage. But Margaret said she refused to make herself smaller to accommodate a man's insecurities. Diana was scribbling notes furiously. And your mother? Victoria Castle. She inherited the pearls when Margaret died in 2003. By then, Mom was already a senior partner at Bailey & Associates, specializing in corporate law. She wore the pearls to every major negotiation, every board meeting, every moment when she needed to remind herself and everyone else that Castle women don't lose. My mother had been a force of nature in the legal world, the kind of attorney other lawyers both feared and respected. She'd negotiated billion-dollar mergers, represented Fortune 500 companies, and somehow managed to balance it all with raising me and my sister. Mom always said the pearls weren't just jewelry, they were a responsibility, I continued. Each woman who wore them had to prove herself worthy of the legacy. She had to fight battles, win victories, leave the world better than she found it. And then she passed them to you. When I graduated from Northwestern with my MBA, Mom said that even though I'd chosen business over law, the principles were the same. She made me promise to never let anyone convince me I was worth less than I knew myself to be. The weight of that broken promise settled over me like a shroud. I'd taken the legacy of 4 generations of groundbreaking women and used it to become Curtis Burnett's accommodating wife. I'd worn those pearls to charity luncheons and firm parties, reducing them from symbols of power to mere accessories for my supporting role in someone else's story. But here's what Curtis never understood, I said, standing up and walking to Diana's window, looking out at the city lights below. When he stole those pearls, when he gave them to his mistress like some casual gift, he wasn't just stealing jewelry. He was stealing 106 years of Castle women refusing to be silenced. Diana looked up from her notes, and I could see she understood the magnitude of what we were dealing with. This wasn't just a divorce case anymore. This was about reclaiming a legacy that had been built on the refusal to accept anything less than equality. Every woman who wore those pearls faced impossible odds and won, I said. They fought senators and stockbrokers and society itself. And now Curtis thinks he can just hand them over to his secretary like they're some trinket he picked up at Tiffany. I turned back to Diana, feeling something awakening in me that had been dormant for years. He has no idea what he's unleashed. Diana pulled up a fresh legal document on her computer, but I could see her mind was still processing the full weight of what Curtis had stolen. Let's talk about the systematic betrayal, she said. I need to understand how he gained access to the necklace and what else he might have taken. I sank back into my chair, feeling the exhaustion of revelation settling over me. It started about 2 years ago. Curtis became obsessed with our home security after there were some break-ins in Lincoln Park. He insisted we get a proper safe installed, something fireproof and theft-proof for our important documents and my jewelry. Let me guess, he handled the installation and knew the combination. He said it would be easier if we both knew it in case of emergencies. The combination was our wedding date. The irony of that detail wasn't lost on me now. I thought it was romantic that he wanted to protect my grandmother's things. He even had the jewelry appraised for insurance purposes, said it was the responsible thing to do. Diana's expression darkened. He was cataloging assets. The safe was in his home office, behind a painting of the Chicago skyline that we'd bought on our 5th anniversary. I rarely went in there. It was his sanctuary filled with law books and case files. I respected his privacy, especially when he was working on sensitive cases. That privacy had been my downfall. For 10 years I'd taken pride in being the wife who didn't snoop, who didn't question late nights or weekend work sessions. I'd seen my trust as a strength, a sign of our mature partnership. Now I realized it had been willful blindness. About 18 months ago, Curtis started suggesting I leave my jewelry at home more often. I continued. He said crime was getting worse downtown, that I was taking unnecessary risks wearing expensive pieces to work or social events. It seemed caring at the time. It was conditioning, Diana said grimly, getting you used to not wearing the necklace so you wouldn't notice when it went missing. I thought back to those conversations, how Curtis had framed his concerns in terms of my safety and security. He'd shown me news articles about muggings, pointed out other women at events who'd been targeted for their jewelry. I'd actually been grateful for his protectiveness. The last time I wore the necklace was to the Illinois Bar Association gala in February, I said. Curtis was receiving an award for pro bono work. I remember because several people commented on how beautiful it was, and Curtis seemed proud to tell them about its history. February, right when his affair with Chrissy was starting. He was probably already planning to give it to her. Maybe that night, seeing how much attention it drew, he realized what a powerful gift it would be. The calculation of it made me sick. After that, every time I mentioned wearing it to an event, Curtis found reasons why it wasn't appropriate. Too flashy for a work function, too formal for a casual dinner, too risky for a crowded venue.
I started noticing things missing about 3 months ago. Small things at first. A diamond tennis bracelet my mother gave me for my 30th birthday, some vintage earrings I'd inherited from my great-aunt. When I asked Curtis about them, he suggested maybe our housekeeper had noticed them missing and hadn't wanted to worry me. He was gaslighting you. He even offered to file insurance claims, said he'd handle all the paperwork because I was so busy with my consulting work. I felt like an idiot for not seeing the pattern. I was actually grateful he was taking care of it. I thought it showed how much he loved me, how he wanted to protect me from stress. The memory of Curtis sitting at our kitchen table with insurance forms, his expression so concerned and caring, now seemed grotesque. He'd been documenting the theft of my own possessions while positioning himself as my protector. But the pearls were different, I continued. When I realized they were missing 2 months ago, I was frantic. I tore the house apart looking for them. Curtis spent an entire weekend helping me search, going through closets, checking under furniture, even calling the insurance company to report them missing. He was covering his tracks. He held me while I cried about losing my grandmother's legacy. He told me that the pearls were just objects, that the real legacy was the strength and values the Castle women had passed down to me. He said my grandmother would have cared more about my happiness than about some jewelry. Diana's jaw tightened. Manipulative bastard. The worst part is that he was right about the legacy being more than the jewelry. But he used that truth to manipulate me into accepting the loss. He made me feel shallow for being so upset about material possessions. I remembered that conversation so clearly. Curtis stroking my hair as I sobbed on our couch, his voice gentle and reasonable as he convinced me to let go of my grief. He'd seemed like the perfect husband, helping me process loss and move forward. In reality, he'd been comforting me over a theft he'd committed himself. 3 weeks later, he brought me a replacement necklace, I said. A beautiful pearl strand from Tiffany, expensive but nothing like my grandmother's. He said he wanted me to have something new to make memories with, something that was just ours, while his mistress was wearing your family heirloom.
Every night for 2 months I went to bed thinking I'd lost my grandmother's pearls through carelessness. I blamed myself, wondered if I'd left them somewhere, forgotten to put them back in the safe. Curtis comforted me through that guilt while he watched his secretary wear them to work every day. Diana closed her laptop and looked at me directly. Evangeline, what Curtis did goes beyond adultery, beyond theft. This was psychological warfare designed to break down your sense of reality and self-worth. He didn't just steal your jewelry, he stole your ability to trust your own perceptions. I nodded, feeling the full weight of the manipulation settling over me. For months I'd questioned my memory, my judgment, my worth. I'd accepted his explanations and comfort while he systematically erased me from my own life. He thought he was so smart, I said. But he made one crucial mistake. What's that? He forgot that castle women document everything. Diana leaned forward, her predatory instincts fully engaged. What do you mean, you document everything? I pulled out my phone and opened the photo app, scrolling back through months of images. Castle women have been lawyers and judges for 4 generations. We're trained from childhood to keep records, to document important moments, to never rely solely on memory when facts might be disputed later. I found what I was looking for and handed Diana my phone. The screen showed a crystal-clear photo of my jewelry collection, laid out on our bed with meticulous organization. Every piece was visible, catalogued, dated. I photograph my jewelry collection every 3 months for insurance purposes, I explained. My mother taught me to do it after she had a break-in during law school. Each photo is time-stamped and backed up to cloud storage. Diana scrolled through the images, her eyes widening as she processed what she was seeing. These photos show exactly what was in your collection and when pieces went missing. February 14th, Valentine's Day. Everything is there, including the pearl necklace. I swiped to the next photo. May 15th, the tennis bracelet and vintage earrings are gone, but the pearls are still there. Another swipe. August 20th, the pearls have vanished. This is evidence of a systematic pattern of theft, Diana said, practically vibrating with legal excitement. But there's more, isn't there? I took back the phone and opened my email app. I keep detailed records of all our social events, partly for tax purposes, since Curtis's firm reimburses some entertainment expenses, but also because my mother always said a woman should document her contributions to her husband's career. I pulled up a folder labeled Social Calendar 2024 and showed Diana months of carefully organized emails. Each contained guest lists, menu plans, expense receipts, and photos from dinner parties and networking events I'd hosted at our home. Look at this one from March 15th, I said, opening an email with attached photos. Dinner party for 8 of Curtis's colleagues and their wives. Note the guest list. Diana scanned the names and stopped at one entry. Thomas Evergreen and guest. Thomas Evergreen, senior partner at Curtis's firm and the man who makes partnership decisions. His guest was a 24-year-old woman named Chrissy White, not his wife, who was apparently sick with the flu that night. Your husband brought his mistress to a dinner party at your house. I cooked for her. I served her wine. I made polite conversation about her paralegal studies while she sat at my dining room table, probably already planning to take over my life. The memory made me nauseous, but also furious. And look at this photo from that evening. I zoomed in on a group shot I'd taken of our guests in our living room. In the background, barely visible but unmistakably there, was my jewelry box sitting open on the dresser in our bedroom, visible through the doorway because I'd been upstairs getting ready when our guests arrived. She could see your jewelry collection from where she was sitting, Diana observed. Every piece was visible. She knew exactly what I owned and where I kept it. I scrolled to more photos from subsequent events. April 8th, firm cocktail party at our house. May 22nd, celebration dinner for Curtis's promotion. June 30th, summer barbecue. Chrissy was at every single event, and I have documented proof.
Diana was making rapid notes, her legal mind cataloging the evidence. This establishes premeditation, opportunity, and a pattern of reconnaissance. But how do we prove she took the jewelry? I opened my banking app and navigated to our joint account statements. Curtis handles most of our finances, but I get copies of everything. Look at this charge from July 18th. Cartier, $2,400. I assumed it was for my replacement necklace, but that didn't come until August. What was the July charge for?
I think it was to have my grandmother's necklace cleaned and restrung before giving it to Chrissy. The timing matches when she started wearing it to work. Other people at Curtis's firm have mentioned seeing her with beautiful pearls during depositions and client meetings. I showed Diana more bank records, each one telling part of the story. August 5th, dinner at La Bernardin, the same restaurant where Curtis proposed to me, charged to our account but I wasn't there. August 12th, lingerie purchase at La Perla, $800. August 20th, that's when I took the photos showing the pearls were missing. He was using your joint funds to wine and dine his mistress and buy her gifts. It gets worse. I opened my laptop and pulled up financial records I'd been compiling for months without really understanding why. I started noticing discrepancies in our accounts around the same time the jewelry went missing. Small amounts at first, $200 here, $500 there, always with explanations about client dinners or professional development. Diana examined the spreadsheet I'd created, her expression growing darker with each line item. This shows systematic financial infidelity spanning 8 months. He's been funding the entire affair with marital assets. The total is nearly $28,000. Hotel rooms, jewelry, dinners, weekend trips I thought were work conferences. All of it documented in our bank statements. All of it charged to accounts I helped fund with my consulting income. I closed the laptop and looked at Diana directly. Curtis thought I was the accommodating wife who didn't pay attention to details, but he forgot that I was trained by women who built careers on documentation and evidence. Every lie he told, every theft he committed, every manipulation he attempted, I have records of all of it. Diana sat back in her chair, and I could see she was recalculating the entire case. Evangeline, this isn't just about adultery and theft anymore. This is financial fraud on a massive scale. With this level of documentation, we can prove systematic deception, theft and misappropriation of marital assets. There's one more thing, I said, feeling the final piece of the puzzle clicking into place. Curtis doesn't know about my trust fund, but I know about his debts. Diana's eyebrows shot up. What debts? Law school loans he never fully paid off, credit card debt from his bachelor days, a gambling problem he thinks I don't know about. I pulled up more financial records on my phone. I've been quietly paying them down for years, thinking I was helping our marriage, but if he's claiming in divorce proceedings that he's the primary breadwinner, he's committing perjury, Diana finished. Jesus Christ, Evangeline, your husband isn't just a cheating bastard, he's a criminal. I felt something cold and hard settle in my chest, like ice forming over deep water. Now do you understand why I want to destroy him? Diana was still processing the mountain of evidence when her phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it, then looked up at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Interesting timing, she said, showing me the screen. Text from my investigator, Marcus Chen. He's been doing some preliminary research on Curtis's firm since you called. Apparently there's someone else who wants to talk. About Curtis. About Chrissy White. Diana stood up and walked to her window, looking out at the city lights. Marcus has been cultivating sources at Evergreen and Associates for months. Paralegals, secretaries, junior associates who see everything but get ignored by the partners. Turns out your husband's affair isn't as secret as he thinks. My heart raced. What do they know? There's a paralegal named Angel Burnett who's been documenting inappropriate behavior at the firm for her own protection. Sexual harassment, financial irregularities, ethics violations. She was planning to file complaints with the Illinois State Bar until she realized how deep the corruption goes. Diana turned back to me. She wants to meet with us. Tonight. 30 minutes later we were sitting in a 24-hour diner in River North, the kind of place where lawyers and cops grabbed coffee during all-nighters. Angel Burnett was younger than I'd expected, maybe 28, with sharp eyes and the tired expression of someone who'd seen too much. Mrs. Burnett, she said, extending her hand as she slid into the booth across from us. I'm sorry we're meeting under these circumstances, but I think we can help each other. Please, call me Evangeline. Diana says you have information about my husband's affair. Angel pulled out a thick folder and set it on the table between us. I have information about a lot of things. Your husband's affair with Chrissy is just the tip of the iceberg. She opened the folder, revealing printouts of emails, financial documents, and photographs. I've been working at Evergreen and Associates for 3 years. I started documenting everything when I realized the firm has a pattern of covering up partner misconduct to protect their reputation. Diana leaned forward, her lawyer instincts engaged. What kind of misconduct? Sexual harassment of female staff, misappropriation of client funds, billing fraud, you name it. But Curtis and Chrissy's situation is special because it involves so many different violations. Angel pulled out a stack of email printouts. Chrissy was hired 8 months ago, allegedly as a paralegal, but she's never actually worked on any cases. Her entire salary, $85,000 a year, comes from Curtis's client expense accounts. He's paying her salary through client billing fraud, I asked, feeling sick. Worse, she's been attending depositions and client meetings, but not as support staff. Curtis has been presenting her as a legal consultant and billing clients $300 an hour for her time. She has no legal training, no certifications, no qualifications whatsoever. Diana whistled low. That's fraud on multiple levels. Billing fraud, misrepresentation to clients, possibly even practicing law without a license. Angel nodded grimly. And it gets worse. 2 weeks ago, Chrissy accessed the firm's client trust account system using Curtis's login credentials. She transferred $15,000 to a personal account, then covered it up by creating fake invoices for legal research services. My head was spinning. She's embezzling client funds? With Curtis's help. Look at this. Angel showed us a printed email exchange between Curtis and Chrissy from last week. The subject line was "covering the transfer." I read Curtis's words with growing horror. Baby, I know you needed the money for your student loans, but we have to be more careful about the paper trail. Next time, run any transfers through my approval first. I'll create legitimate billing entries to cover it.
Curtis is actively helping her steal from clients, Diana said, reading over my shoulder. This isn't just an affair, it's a criminal conspiracy. Angel pulled out more documents. There's also this issue with the Henderson merger Curtis has been supposedly working on for months, the one that's been keeping him away from home. The Henderson merger closed 6 weeks ago. Curtis billed 400 hours of work on it, but according to the case files, he logged maybe 50 hours total. The rest of the billing was fabricated to cover the time he was spending with Chrissy. I felt the last pieces of my marriage crumbling away. Every late night, every missed dinner, every apologetic text about working on the Henderson deal, all of it had been lies to cover an affair that was funded by fraud and theft. Why are you telling us this? Diana asked Angel. This could destroy your career if it comes out that you were the source. Angel's expression hardened. Because Curtis Burnett represents everything wrong with the legal profession. He's a partner who uses his position to exploit young women, steal from clients, and corrupt the entire system. And because she hesitated, then pulled out one final document. Because last month Curtis offered me a promotion and a raise if I would be more flexible about documenting his billable hours. When I refused, he started making my work life hell. I think he's planning to fire me to cover up what I know. So you're protecting yourself, I said, understanding. I'm protecting all of us. You, me, the clients being defrauded, the other women at the firm who are being harassed. Curtis thinks his partnership makes him untouchable, but he's wrong. Diana was practically glowing with predatory satisfaction. Angel, how would you feel about being a witness in divorce proceedings that could also trigger criminal investigations? I'd feel like justice was finally being served. I looked between these two women, a ruthless divorce attorney and a principled paralegal, and realized I wasn't alone in this fight. Curtis and Chrissy thought they were so clever, so careful, so protected by his status and connections. They had no idea they were about to face 3 women who had detailed documentation of every crime they'd committed. Ladies, I said, feeling truly powerful for the first time in months, I think it's time we introduced Curtis to some consequences he can't charm his way out of. Angel slid a flash drive across the table to Diana. Everything I just showed you is on here, plus about 50 more documents, email chains, billing records, client trust account transfers, security footage from the office cameras showing Chrissy in Curtis's office during hours she was supposedly working on cases. Diana pocketed the drive immediately. How much time do we have before anyone notices you've copied these files? I've been collecting evidence for months as part of my own protection strategy. Nothing I took tonight will be missed. Most of it comes through my normal access to case files and billing systems.
Angel's voice was steady, professional, but if Curtis is planning to file divorce papers Monday like your video suggests, we need to move fast. I checked my phone. It was almost midnight. What's our timeline? Diana opened her laptop and began typing rapidly. Illinois courts open at 8 a.m. Monday morning. If we file first, we control the narrative and the asset freeze. But more importantly, if we coordinate with the right authorities, we can turn this from a simple divorce into a criminal investigation. What do you mean? Client trust fund theft, wire fraud, billing fraud, all federal crimes. If we can get them interested, Curtis won't just lose his marriage and his job. He'll lose his freedom. The magnitude of what we were planning hit me fully. 6 hours ago, I'd thought I was surprising my husband with anniversary gifts. Now I was part of a conspiracy to destroy his entire life. But as I thought about my grandmother's pearls around Chrissy's throat, about Curtis's casual dismissal of my contributions, about the systematic way he'd stolen and lied and manipulated, I felt no sympathy whatsoever. What do we need to do? I asked. Diana pulled out a legal pad and began making lists. First, we need to secure your personal assets before Curtis realizes what's happening. Angel, can you access Curtis's calendar for tomorrow? Easily. He's scheduled to be in depositions all day, then dinner with clients at Gibson's. He won't be home until after 10. Perfect. Evangeline, tomorrow afternoon we're going to your house to document everything. We'll photograph every room, every piece of property, create a complete inventory of marital assets. We'll also retrieve any personal items you don't want Curtis to have access to during the proceedings. I thought about our house, filled with 10 years of shared memories and accumulated possessions. What about the safe? My other jewelry is still in there. We're taking everything that belongs to you, including items Curtis might try to claim or hide. Do you have the combination memorized? Our wedding date, October 15, 2014. Angel made a note. While you're doing that, I'll be documenting everything I can access at the office. Curtis thinks I'm working late on the Morrison case tomorrow, so I'll have unrestricted access to his files and computer. Diana looked up from her legal pad. Angel, I need you to be very careful about this. What we're asking you to do could be considered corporate espionage if it's not handled properly. Everything I'm accessing is part of my normal job duties. I work on Curtis's cases, I have legitimate access to his files, and I'm required to review billing records as part of my administrative responsibilities. Angel's tone was matter of fact. If anyone questions why I was looking at certain documents, I have legitimate business reasons. Good. Now Evangeline, we need to talk about your trust fund. How quickly can you access it? My family's attorney manages it. I can call him first thing Monday morning. I paused, thinking about the complexity of what Diana was suggesting. But won't moving money look suspicious? Like I'm hiding assets? Not if you do it right. We're not hiding assets, we're protecting them from theft. Curtis has already proven he'll steal jewelry and misappropriate funds. We have legitimate reasons to believe he might try to access your trust if he discovers it exists. Diana turned to a fresh page on her legal pad. Here's the timeline. Tomorrow, Saturday, we document everything and secure your personal property. Sunday, we compile all evidence and prepare legal filings. Monday morning at 8 a.m. sharp, we file for divorce with a request for temporary restraining orders and asset freezes. And then we hold a press conference at noon and release everything to the media. Curtis's career won't survive having his financial crimes and ethics violations splashed across the Chicago Tribune, especially when it's connected to stealing from his wife and clients. Angel leaned back in the booth, a small smile playing at her lips. You know what the best part is? Curtis has been so arrogant about this affair that he's left evidence everywhere. Love letters in his office email, romantic dinners charged to client accounts, even security footage of them making out in conference rooms during billable hours. He thought he was untouchable, I said, understanding dawning. Senior partner, respected attorney, powerful connections, he never imagined anyone would dare challenge him. That's exactly right, Diana said. Curtis built his entire scheme on the assumption that you would never fight back, that Angel would never speak up, that his reputation would protect him from consequences. He forgot that his success was built on a foundation of other people's silence and compliance. I thought about my grandmother, sitting through those brutal confirmation hearings, facing down senators who wanted her to fail. About my mother negotiating billion-dollar deals in rooms full of men who dismissed her until she proved them wrong. About the legacy of strength I'd inherited and nearly given away. Well, I said, raising my coffee cup in a toast, he's about to learn that castle women don't stay silent for long. Diana and Angel raised their own cups, and for the first time since walking into Curtis's office, I felt truly hopeful. Tomorrow we would begin taking back everything he'd stolen. Saturday afternoon, Diana and I stood in the driveway of my Lincoln Park home, a moving truck parked behind us. The house looked exactly as I'd left it the night before. Beautiful, welcoming, completely normal. It was surreal to think that in 24 hours everything had changed. Remember, Diana said, checking her watch. Angel confirmed Curtis is in depositions until 6, then dinner with the Morrison clients. We have at least 4 hours before there's any chance he comes home early. I unlocked the front door with hands that were steadier than I'd expected. The house felt different now, not like a home but like a crime scene. Every room held evidence of the life I'd built with a man who'd been systematically betraying me. Let's start with the office, Diana said, following me down the hall. We need to document the safe and its contents before we remove anything. Curtis's office was exactly as he'd left it, law books lining the walls, case files stacked on his desk, the Chicago skyline painting hanging behind his chair. I approached the painting and swung it aside, revealing the digital safe we'd installed 2 years ago. 10-15-14, I said, entering our wedding date. The safe clicked open with a soft beep. Inside, exactly as I'd left them months ago, were my remaining jewelry pieces. The emerald earrings my mother had given me for my law school graduation, my great-aunt's diamond bracelet, the vintage Cartier watch that had belonged to my grandfather, all of it accounted for except for the missing pieces that were now decorating Curtis's mistress. Diana photographed everything, creating a complete inventory. These will all be removed today, and placed in a safety deposit box under your name only. Curtis won't have access to steal anything else. I carefully placed each piece in individual jewelry boxes, wrapping them like precious artifacts, which in a way they were tangible connections to the women who'd come before me, the legacy I'd almost let Curtis destroy completely. Evangeline, Diana called from Curtis's desk. You need to see this. She was holding a manila folder labeled Personal Confidential in Curtis's distinctive handwriting. Inside were documents I'd never seen before, copies of my trust fund statements, my consulting income records, even my childhood savings account information from when I was 16. He's been investigating your finances for years, Diana said grimly. Look at this timeline. The documents were organized chronologically, dating back to our 3rd year of marriage. Bank statements, tax returns, investment portfolios. Curtis had been systematically documenting my financial history while pretending to respect my privacy about the trust fund. This shows premeditation spanning 7 years, Diana observed. He wasn't just planning to leave you, he was planning to maximize what he could take when he did. I found a handwritten note in Curtis's writing clipped to the most recent trust fund statement. E's total liquid assets approximately 2.9 M. Unaware of IL marital property law regarding premarital trusts. Divorce filing strategy. Claim ignorance of fund existence. Argue for 50-50 division of all discovered assets. The cold calculation of it took my breath away. He was planning to steal half of my inheritance by pretending he'd just discovered it during divorce proceedings. Except now we can prove he's known about it for years, and actively concealed that knowledge. That's fraud, and it invalidates any claim he might have had to the money. Diana's phone buzzed with a text from Angel. Curtis just finished his depositions 2 hours early. He's heading to his office to collect some files before dinner. My stomach tightened. Is that a problem? Not for us, but it might be interesting for Angel. She said she's been documenting his computer files all afternoon. Diana checked her watch. We need to speed this up. The moving crew should be here any minute to pack up your personal belongings. As if summoned by her words, the doorbell rang. 3 professional movers stood on my front porch, ready to extract my life from the house I'd called home for 8 years. Everything on this list, I said, handing them the inventory Diana and I had prepared. Clothing, books, artwork I owned before marriage, kitchen items that were gifts to me specifically, and all the photo albums. The photo albums were perhaps the most painful items to remove. 10 years of marriage documented in careful detail. Vacations, anniversaries, dinner parties, quiet moments at home, All of it would now serve as evidence in divorce proceedings rather than cherished memories. My phone rang as the movers began carrying boxes to their truck. Angel's name appeared on the screen. "Evangeline," she said without preamble. "Curtis just showed up at the office. He's in his office right now, on the phone with someone. I think you need to hear this. Can you record it?"
I'm already recording. He's talking to Thomas Evergreen about filing divorce papers first thing Monday morning. But here's the interesting part. He just mentioned that he's been tracking your trust fund for years and plans to claim half of it. Diana grabbed the phone from me. "Angel, keep recording everything. Don't let him see you, but document whatever you can. We might need this as evidence of his intent to commit fraud." "There's something else," Angel said. "Chrissy is here too. She's wearing different jewelry today. A diamond bracelet and emerald earrings. I think they might be Evangeline's other missing pieces." I looked down at the empty jewelry boxes in my hands, then at the photos Diana had taken of the safe's contents. The emerald earrings and diamond bracelet were among the pieces I'd assumed were still secure. "He's been giving her my jewelry piece by piece," I said, fury building in my chest. While I thought they were safe in his office, he was treating them like a personal shopping mall for his mistress. Diana's eyes gleamed with predatory satisfaction. "Perfect. Angel, can you get photographs of Chrissy wearing the stolen jewelry?" "Already done. I've got clear shots of her wearing the earrings and bracelet, time-stamped from this afternoon." As the movers carried the last of my belongings to their truck, I felt a strange sense of completion. I wasn't just removing my possessions from Curtis's reach, I was removing myself from the life he'd built on lies and theft. "One more thing," Diana said as we prepared to leave. "Tomorrow morning we're going to visit Chrissy at her apartment. I want to see what other stolen property she's been enjoying, and I want her to understand exactly what she's gotten herself into." I looked back at the house one final time, then climbed into Diana's car. "Let's go remind her that stealing from the wrong woman has consequences she never imagined." Sunday morning at 9 a.m., Diana and I stood outside Chrissy White's apartment building in River North. Angel had provided the address along with intelligence that Chrissy typically spent Sunday mornings at the building's rooftop pool, flaunting her lifestyle to the other residents. "Remember," Diana said as we approached the concierge desk, "we're not here to cause a scene. We're here to serve notice and recover stolen property. Everything needs to be documented and legal." The concierge, a well-dressed man in his 50s, looked up as we approached. "Can I help you, ladies? We're here to see Chrissy White in 24B, Diana said, presenting her business card. "I'm her attorney regarding a property matter that requires immediate attention." It wasn't technically a lie. Diana would be representing Chrissy's interests in making sure she didn't go to prison for receiving stolen goods if she cooperated. The elevator ride to the 24th floor felt eternal. My grandmother's pearls were somewhere in this building, along with who knew what other pieces of my family's legacy. But more than that, the woman who'd casually discussed stealing my life was about to learn that actions have consequences. Apartment 24B had a doormat that read "Blessed and Grateful," a irony so perfect it would have been funny if it weren't so infuriating. Diana knocked firmly. The door opened to reveal Chrissy White in silk pajamas and a robe, her hair tousled from sleep. She looked exactly as she had in Curtis's office. Young, beautiful, completely confident in her position. That confidence flickered when she saw us. "Can I help you?" she asked, but her voice carried a note of uncertainty. "Miss White, I'm Diana Whitmore, attorney for Evangeline Castle. We need to discuss some property that's come into your possession unlawfully." Chrissy's eyes widened as she recognized my name. For a moment I saw panic flash across her features before she composed herself. "I don't know what you're talking about. Curtis never mentioned." "Curtis doesn't know we're here," I interrupted, stepping forward. "This conversation is between you and me. You're wearing my grandmother's emerald earrings." Instinctively, Chrissy's hand moved to her ears, touching the emeralds that matched the ones I'd seen photographed in Curtis's safe just yesterday. "These were a gift from my jewelry collection, stolen from my home safe," Diana said crisply. "We have photographs documenting every piece in Mrs. Castle's collection, insurance appraisals, and security footage of you accessing the safe using information obtained through fraud." It was a bluff about the security footage, but Chrissy didn't know that. Her face went pale. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," she said,
stepping back into her apartment. Curtis said the jewelry belonged to him, that they were family pieces he wanted me to have. Curtis lied, I said simply. Just like he's been lying to you about filing for divorce, about leaving me, about building a future together. White, are you aware that adultery combined with theft of marital assets can result in both criminal charges and complete forfeiture of any claims in divorce proceedings? Chrissy stared at the phone screen, watching herself with Curtis in his office, hearing their conversation about choosing each other and dividing up my life. You were recording us. I was recording my husband's betrayal, I corrected. You just happened to be part of it. Along with wearing my stolen jewelry and discussing how my family heirlooms suited you better than they suited me, Curtis said you never wore them anymore, that you'd gotten practical and boring. Curtis said a lot of things. The question is whether you're going to keep believing them or start protecting yourself. Diana stepped closer. Because right now you're facing charges for receiving stolen goods, conspiracy to commit fraud, and potentially accessory to embezzlement of client funds. Chrissy's composure cracked completely. Embezzlement? What are you talking about? Your salary, for starters. $85,000 a year for work you've never actually performed, paid through fraudulent client billing. Then there's the $15,000 you transferred from the client trust account, the fake legal consultant fees Curtis has been charging for your time, and the systematic theft of marital assets to fund your relationship. I watched the blood drain from Chrissy's face as she realized the magnitude of what she'd gotten involved in. I didn't know about any financial crimes. Curtis handled all of that. Ignorance isn't a defense when you're wearing the evidence, I said, gesturing to the emerald earrings. But cooperation might be.
Diana opened her briefcase and pulled out a legal document. Miss White, this is a cooperation agreement. You return all stolen property immediately, provide testimony about Curtis's financial crimes, and agree to resign from Evergreen and Associates. In exchange, we recommend minimal charges and no jail time. And if I don't, then tomorrow morning, when we file divorce papers and turn over evidence to the FBI, you become a co-defendant in multiple federal crimes. Your pretty apartment, your lifestyle, your future, all of it disappears while you spend the next 5 to 10 years in federal prison. Chrissy looked between us, understanding finally dawning that she wasn't the winner in some romantic triangle. She was the expendable accomplice in a criminal conspiracy, and Curtis would sacrifice her without hesitation to save himself. The jewelry is in my bedroom safe, she said quietly. All of it. Curtis gave me pieces over the past few months, said they were family heirlooms he wanted me to wear, including the pearl necklace. It's my favorite piece. He said it belonged to his grandmother, that giving it to me meant he was ready to build a new family legacy. Her voice broke slightly. He was lying about that too, wasn't he? Every word, I confirmed. That necklace has been worn by castle women for over 70 years. It represents strength, dignity, and the refusal to be diminished by anyone. Curtis turned it into a prop for his deception. 20 minutes later, we left Chrissy's apartment with every piece of my stolen jewelry, along with her signed cooperation agreement, and a detailed statement about Curtis's financial crimes. As we walked to Diana's car, I fastened my grandmother's pearl necklace around my throat for the first time in months. The weight of it felt like coming home. How do you feel? Diana asked. I touched the pearls gently, thinking about my grandmother facing down hostile senators, my mother negotiating with men who underestimated her, all the castle women who'd refused to be defeated by those who thought they were powerless. Like myself again, I said. For the first time in years I feel exactly like myself. Tomorrow Curtis would learn what that meant. Monday morning, 8:03 a.m. Diana and I walked through the marble halls of the Cook County Courthouse, our legal filings stamped and officially recorded. The emergency motion for asset freeze and restraining order had been granted within minutes. Judge Patricia Morrison had taken one look at the evidence and declared it one of the most egregious cases of marital fraud she'd seen in 20 years. Curtis's phone has been ringing non-stop for the past hour, Diana said, checking her own device. 17 missed calls and counting. I felt eerily calm as we made our way to the courthouse steps. In 3 hours, I'd gone from Curtis Burnett's accommodating wife to the woman who'd just legally destroyed his life. The restraining order barred him from our house,
froze all joint accounts and required him to surrender his passport pending the criminal investigation. Mrs. Castle, a reporter from the Chicago Tribune, jogged toward us, camera crew in tow. Can you comment on the allegations against your husband? Diana had orchestrated this perfectly. The media loved stories about corrupt lawyers, especially when they involved theft, adultery, and prominent firms. By noon, Curtis's criminal conspiracy would be front-page news across Chicago. My husband Curtis Burnett systematically stole family heirlooms from our home safe and gave them to his mistress while defrauding clients at Evergreen and Associates, I said calmly, letting the pearls catch the morning light. These crimes were not impulsive mistakes, they were calculated betrayals spanning years. What's your response to his claims that you're bitter about the divorce and fabricating evidence? I smiled, the expression feeling foreign after months of accommodation and self-doubt. Mr. Burnett is free to make those claims in federal court when he's arraigned on embezzlement charges later this week. Diana's phone rang as we reached our car. That's Marcus, she said, answering immediately. What's happening at Evergreen? I could hear pieces of the conversation. FBI raid, computer servers seized, partners in emergency session. Diana's expression grew more satisfied with each update. The FBI executed search warrants at Evergreen and Associates 20 minutes ago, she reported after hanging up. They're seizing Curtis's computer, client files, and all financial records related to the trust account fraud. My phone buzzed with a text from Angel. Curtis just got escorted out by federal agents, handcuffs and everything. Building security is clearing out his office now. The image of Curtis being led away in handcuffs should have made me sad. We'd shared 10 years of marriage, built a life together, made promises to each other, but all I felt was cold satisfaction. He'd gambled everything on my continued silence and compliance, and lost spectacularly. There's more, Diana said, reading another message. Thomas Evergreen just called an emergency partnership meeting. Word is they're voting to remove Curtis from the firm before the scandal destroys their reputation entirely. Can they do that? Partnership agreements typically include morality clauses. Curtis's arrest for embezzling client funds gives them grounds for immediate termination with forfeiture of all partnership equity. Diana's smile was predatory. He won't just lose his job, he'll lose his entire stake in the firm he spent 15 years building. We drove to my new apartment in Gold Coast, a furnished place Diana had arranged while Curtis was trapped in weekend depositions. As we parked, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Evangeline. Curtis's voice was strained, desperate. Please, we need to talk. This is all a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding, I said calmly. I have 47 minutes of video evidence of you choosing Chrissy over me while she wore my stolen jewelry. I have financial records showing systematic fraud spanning 8 months. I have documentation of every lie you told and every dollar you stole. The jewelry was a mistake. I was going to tell you. You were going to tell me nothing. You were going to file for divorce Monday morning and claim ignorance about my trust fund while demanding half of assets you'd been secretly tracking for 7 years. Silence on the other end. Then, how did you know about the trust fund investigation? Because unlike you, I document everything, including the files in your office detailing your 7-year plan to defraud me in divorce proceedings. Evangeline, please. I made mistakes, but we can work this out. Don't destroy everything we built together. Curtis, I interrupted. You destroyed everything we built the moment you chose her over me. I'm just making sure you face consequences for it. This will ruin my career, my reputation. Your career was built on fraud and theft. Your reputation was built on lies and deception. I'm not ruining anything. I'm revealing what was always there. What about 10 years of marriage? Doesn't that mean anything to you?
I thought about the woman I'd been when we met. Ambitious, confident, certain of my own worth. Then I thought about the woman I'd become. Smaller, quieter, always accommodating someone else's dreams while abandoning my own. 10 years taught me exactly who you are, Curtis. A man who steals from his wife, lies to his clients, and discards people when they're no longer useful. I touched my grandmother's pearls, feeling their familiar weight. But they also taught me who I am. And I'm not the woman you can manipulate anymore. Evangeline, wait. I hung up and blocked his number. Diana was watching from the driver's seat, her expression impressed. How do you feel? She asked. Free, I said, and meant it completely. For the first time in years, I feel absolutely free.
Above us, the headlines were already changing everything Curtis thought he knew about power, control, and consequences. 6 months later, I stood in the penthouse office of Castle & Associates, the strategic consulting firm I'd launched with my trust fund after the divorce was finalized. Through floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the Chicago skyline stretching toward Lake Michigan, the same view I'd once admired from Curtis's office when I thought his success was our success. Now I understood the difference between supporting someone else's dreams and building your own empire. The Morrison account signed this morning, my assistant Taylor announced, setting a contract on my desk. They want you to personally handle their corporate restructuring. Apparently, word has gotten out about your work with Henderson Industries. Henderson Industries, the company Curtis had claimed was consuming all his time during our marriage. It turned out they'd actually been looking for a consultant to handle their post-merger integration, work that would have been perfect for my expertise. Curtis had known about the opportunity but never mentioned it, preferring to keep me focused on managing his career rather than building my own. After the divorce, I'd contacted Henderson directly. Within 3 months, I'd successfully guided their integration process, saved them $12 million in redundancies, and earned a reputation as the consultant who could handle what others couldn't. My client base had grown from that single success to 15 major corporations, all seeking the strategic insights that had been wasted on dinner parties and networking events for Curtis's benefit. "Any word from the prosecutor's office about the sentencing?" Taylor asked. I glanced at the newspaper folded on my desk, Curtis's photo on the front page above the headline, "Disgraced attorney sentenced to 7 years for embezzlement." The trial had been a sensation in Chicago legal circles, with Chrissy's testimony providing devastating details about the systematic fraud Curtis had orchestrated. 7 years federal prison, full restitution to clients, permanent disbarment, I said. Justice served. Chrissy had received 2 years probation in exchange for her cooperation, along with community service and a permanent ban from working in any legal capacity. She'd disappeared from Chicago after the trial, her social media presence scrubbed clean, her luxurious lifestyle replaced by whatever anonymity she could find in another city. The funny thing was, I felt no satisfaction from their downfall anymore. The anger that had driven me through those first weeks had transformed into something more powerful, absolute clarity about my own worth and capabilities. My phone chimed with a text from Angel, who'd left Evergreen and Associates to become my director of operations. "The Tribune wants to interview you about the Castle Foundation launch. Should I schedule it?" The Castle Foundation was my latest project, a nonprofit organization providing legal and financial assistance to women escaping marriages built on financial abuse and manipulation. We'd already helped 37 women navigate divorce proceedings where their husbands had hidden assets, manipulated finances, or used economic control as a weapon. "Schedule it for Thursday," I replied. "But make sure they understand the focus should be on the women we're helping, not my personal story." I walked to the window, my grandmother's pearls catching the afternoon light. In the months since the divorce, I'd learned something important. The necklace hadn't been stolen from me when Curtis gave it to Chrissy. It had been stolen from me gradually, over years, as I made myself smaller to accommodate his ego and ambitions. Reclaiming the physical pearls had been symbolic. Reclaiming myself had been the real victory. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. Diana entered, carrying a bottle of champagne, and wearing the satisfied expression of someone who'd just won an impossible case. "The Illinois State Bar Association just voted to use your case as a template for new ethics enforcement," she announced. "Curtis Burnett's name will be synonymous with professional misconduct for the next decade." And the civil suit. Evergreen and Associates settled for $2.3 million rather than face trial for enabling Curtis's crimes. They've also implemented new oversight procedures for partner conduct and client trust accounts. Diana set the champagne on my desk. "Your lawsuit literally changed how major law firms monitor their partners' behavior." I opened the champagne, filling 2 glasses with the same Dom Perignon I'd brought to Curtis's office that night 6 months ago. The symbolism wasn't lost on either of us. "To Castle women," Diana said, raising her glass. "To refusing to be diminished," I replied, touching my pearls with my free hand. As the sun set over Chicago, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, I thought about the woman I'd been 6 months ago, desperate to save a marriage that was already dead, willing to believe any lie that preserved the illusion of love, convinced that accommodation was the same as strength. That woman was gone, replaced by someone harder, wiser, and infinitely more powerful. Someone who understood that true partnership meant mutual respect, not one-sided sacrifice. Someone who built her own empire instead of supporting someone else's dreams at the expense of her own. Curtis had thought he was choosing Chrissy over me. What he'd actually done was set me free to become the woman I was always meant to be. The woman wearing my grandmother's pearls wasn't just reclaiming stolen jewelry. She was reclaiming a legacy of strength that would never be diminished again. Diamond hard, diamond bright, exactly as my grandmother had promised. In the distance, the lights of the city began to twinkle like stars, and I smiled, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new victories, and new opportunities to prove that castle women don't just survive betrayal, we transform it into triumph.
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.